Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and welcome the opportunity to speak on the motion here before us. And look, Minister, the opposition will put forward its case for an emergency budget. You will respond back and say there's no need for an emergency budget and that you'll address these issues in October. But the reality is, Minister, that there are practical steps that can be taken today that can make a real difference to families that are struggling. And, you know, Minister, you and I sat down around the table when we were negotiating Project Ireland 2040. And at that time, we set a target of retrofitting 45,000 homes from 2021 on. And as you know, Minister, that target was watered down this year to just 22,000 homes, 4,500 of whom will be people on social welfare. And the grants that were announced, with such fanfare earlier on in the year, we'd be really lucky if the very first of those grants is paid by the end of September when the fuel allowance kicks in. And, you know, we can increase the fuel allowance and we can increase social welfare rates, but the one long-term measure that can address the challenges that our people are facing at the moment in terms of energy bills and the cost of heating their homes is to actually reduce the cost of heating that home. And the practical way to do that is through the retrofitting. And that programme of retrofitting should have been ramped up at this stage. It hasn't, and it's not because of COVID-19, but there is a need now to prioritise the retrofitting of homes. One of the other issues, Minister, that people are facing at the moment is the spiralling cost of accommodation. That is, if they're lucky enough to be able to secure a property to rent at the moment. And look, this was a very serious issue and has been a very serious issue in our cities for a long period of time. But, Minister, in the last 5 days, I've had 3 professionals come to me in my constituency office who are looking for housing accommodation to rent in Roscommon town. It cannot be got at any price. And these are 3 professionals who are working in the town of Roscommon, and they cannot source accommodation in the town or the hinterland of it. Now, what is absolutely criminal in relation to this is, and again the CSO has come out with the figures in the last few days, we have 4,000 vacant houses in County Roscommon. We have over 100,000 vacant houses across this country in the middle of a housing emergency. And one thing that could help to reduce the cost of housing and provide accommodation for people would be to release those homes. And one way that could help to do that is to alter the conditions on the Department of Housing and Local Government's repair and lease scheme. And this is the scheme where the local authority can take over private accommodation from a landlord, carry out the repairs that need to be carried out to that house, and then lease it out for 5 years. But the condition of acquiring those properties is that the local authority must show a housing need in that community. Now, the difficulty is, Minister, and you know well, that if you have small villages like we have in County Roscommon, there aren't and hasn't been a tradition of local authority housing in those areas. People don't express a preference to reside there. In fact, those villages are not even listed on the council housing application form. So even though there's vacant housing there, that there is a huge demand for housing, these houses cannot come in under the repair and lease scheme. And a small alteration to the terms and conditions of that scheme regarding the housing need test would really help to release some of those properties. And I've no doubt about it, there are people on the social housing list who would take that accommodation. But if they're not willing to take it, I can tell you there are many, many more people like the 3 professionals that I've spoken to, like many people here in this city who would relocate back to rural Ireland if they had the opportunity of a fixed rent over a 5-year period. So the local authority won't be stuck with those properties, but we do need a bit of initiative to try and release some of these properties into the housing market that are urgently needed at the moment. The final point I want to make to you, Minister, is in relation to a set of pointless charges that are in the system at the moment that need to be taken out of that system. The first one is the public service obligation on electricity customers. Every month, the state is collecting through the PSO €4.88 of every single electricity customer, without any need for that money at the moment. In fact, the state is taking in that money at the moment and plans to actually give it back to people next October. And surely it would make far more sense to suspend the collection of the PSO today and give people some relief, rather than gathering that money in now and bringing forward legislation to maybe try and give some of that money back later on in the year, and give people a break today in relation to it. And while I'm on the issue of that legislation, the legislation that comes forward here tomorrow, and I know that you'll pony up front the capital cost to allow EirGrid to buy the generating capacity for 450 megawatts of electricity. But ultimately, it's every single electricity customer in this country that will pay for that. Now, you and I know, Minister, from the engagement that we've had previously, a lot of that 450 megawatts of electricity that we have to acquire is because of the huge demand being placed on our electricity network because of data centres. And as you know, Minister, I've said to you in the past, I believe that it is immoral that electricity customers, families that are struggling to pay electricity bills, should be subsidising the cost of green electricity going into data centres, should be subsidising the cost of transporting that electricity from the west coast of Ireland to those data centres in Dublin. Those companies should pay those costs themselves, instead of passing that back to families that are struggling to pay their electricity bills today. And I would urge you, Minister, to deal with that issue today. The final point that I'm going to leave with you, Minister, is another pointless charge, and I know we'll disagree on this, and that is in relation to the carbon tax, which at the moment is costing motorists about 13 cents a litre when VAT is included. Now, this has a disproportionate impact on families living in rural areas and in rural communities where they don't have the availability of public transport, where they cannot get the 20% relief that the government is providing on public transport in urban areas. And as I've said to you before, Minister, we need a form of carbon tax that is fluid, so that when the price of oil goes up, the carbon tax take goes down, and when the price of oil comes down, that carbon tax take goes up, so that we have a consistent incremental increase in the price of fossil fuels and oil between now and 2030, rather than this seesaw approach, which will do nothing to motivate people to actually move in the long term to more sustainable options. Now, you'll come back, Minister, and you'll argue with me, well, that money is needed to carry out the retrofitting that I've spoken about. And the point I'd put to you, Minister, is we are now getting in substantially more money in VAT of fossil fuels, of petrol and diesel and home heating fuels than we had projected at budget time last year. And that money could be used to cross-subsidise the lack of carbon tax that would be brought in by giving people relief in relation to that. But the one thing that the alteration in carbon tax would do tomorrow morning is that it would disproportionately benefit families in rural areas. And as you know, Minister,
Minister, what the ESRI has said is that families in rural communities are being disproportionately impacted by the increase in the costs of fuels and the increase right across our economy that we're all experiencing at present. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.